Hello, everyone. This is FIDE Victor News-Troy. Thank you for coming for our today's webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the initiative in the endgame. So I'm going to start in a few minutes. Let's wait while more people join our event. Okay, so looks like here in the very beginning of our webinar, we already have 8 people, which is good. Okay, yesterday I was participating in the Blitz tournament here in Argentina. So I'm gonna show you. Well, it was a bit complicated. I am not a good Blitz player. I am really good with standard time control, but well, I just wanted to play and practice with Blitz. Uh, so so my number was 18. There were a few grandmasters, few international masters, and of course a lot of FIDE masters. And these are final rankings. Okay, is it possible to change the language? Yes. So, and this is what we had after round 11. And I was a bit tired already after round 7. So I finally got only the 19th place. So if you take a look at my profile, I lost all serious games. I lost to international master Kevin Pavetto and FIDE master Hernan Perelman. So yeah, I think so. This and all the games I lost were because I lost them on time. So all the games are lost by time. Well, actually, here against international master Kevin Pavetto, I lost a game because he was able to develop some initiative in the end game. Exactly what we are going to study today. I do not want to include this game, not because I lost, but because the quality of the game, because we were playing on seconds, was really bad in the last stage of the game. So that's why no, we are not going to cover it. Okay, let me check if there are new participants. Okay, yes. However, in some games, I was just lucky that my opponent didn't realize the advantage that they had. Anyway, well, not a bad result, but something that I would love to improve. Last time, my performance rating was 1800 in Blitz, 1850 something. I don't remember, 50 or 60. This time it's 21. However, my standard tournament performance is about is almost 24. It's over 2400 already. Okay, guys, if you have anything to share with me, you're welcome. So yeah, let's just wait for a few more minutes. You can probably ask me why my hairs are wet. Well, it's because in this building where I rent a flat, there is a swimming pool, and because it's summer in Argentina, I try to swim in this swimming pool quite often, especially when the weather is hot. Now it's average. It's summer, but uh, it's not so hot at the moment. But it's gonna be rainy today, I think. So anyway, I did take a chance to swim before this webinar after I finished the class. Okay. So you can also let me know whether everything works perfectly well, the sound, video quality, and also, guys, if you are here for the first time, can you please let me know your rating? It can be either FIDE rating, USCF, or at least chess.com rating. Okay, so I'm sharing the screen. I'm sharing the screen. You see the position. This is the end game played in the it's quite an old game. It was played in the beginning of It was played in 1984, even before I was born. The game between Maya Chiburdanidze, the world champion and also quite a famous Soviet female player, and Peter Lukacs. So I am we are doing a Zoom meeting, and also this is there is a stream on YouTube, but this stream on YouTube may be a bit slow, and usually it has 20 seconds delay. Okay, fine. So Alexander is here for the first time. His rating is 1350 on chess.com. Okay, good. By the way, Alexander, please share us about the class that you have with our coach, Julian, International Master Julian Nieta. So just anything, whether you liked it, are you going to continue your classes with him? Are you looking for another coach? And what are your goals in chess? Okay. Anyway, so let's start. By the way, guys, if your microphones are good, you can unmute yourself and say anything. Well, say anything that is related to our topic today, especially if you don't have any background noise. Okay, so I just need to open the list of participants. Okay, so let's start. Today we are going to talk about initiative, and some people may not understand what initiative actually means. Some people consider initiative to be an attack on the enemy king. And well, I can say that an attack on the king, yes, it does provide you with initiative, but the initiative is not only limited to the attack of the enemy king. So by initiative means that it's a kind of an ability to make a series of moves that forces your opponent to defend the position or to find the ways of how to parry your threats. So it cannot be not only attack on the king, but it can be, for example, a threat of capturing the pawn, which forces your opponent to defend this pawn. It can be what else? Uh, just any threat to capture anything, any threat to improve your position significantly, a threat of occupying the center and then dominating in the game. So, and having this series of threats, including some checks on the kings, or maybe not including these checks, will provide you with the initiative. So if you, for example, look in this position, we can definitely say that both kings are exposed. It's white to move. The black king is more exposed because the white king has a possibility to go to h2. There is a weakness, the c7 pawn in this position. A6 may be a weakness too. B4 is a weakness. So black has more weaknesses. Their king is more compromised, but at the same time, of course, from my previous webinars, you know that these two pieces, the queen and the knight, together can create more attacking combinations against queen and bishop. But it doesn't obligatory mean that white is winning here. If you, for example, turn the engine on in this position, it says that white is just very little, slightly better. It's plus 0.2. So I would say the position is equal, and the game is likely to end in a draw if it was the engine playing with black pieces. But there were two human players. So what do you think? What white can do to convert their benefits, develop the initiative in this position, and because of that, obtain some advantage? Okay, so what are your suggestions? Centralize the queen and hit the king. I like queen c4 with the idea of centralizing the queen. Okay, it makes sense. But do this move create threats? So generally speaking, you are correct. What you should do here is to try to activate your queen, create some threats. Do not let your opponent create threats and attack your king. Okay, so knight e4. Knight e4 is interesting move, but doesn't it mean that he can just simply take? Or what else does he have? So this move doesn't work because of queen f6 and queen takes f5. So knight e4 is an interesting idea, but I don't think it works right away. So I think that he can simply take, then you take with the queen, of course. And then what? Because if you decide to, well, okay, move the king. So what I don't like is that once you take here, it's queen b4. And even with one extra pawn, but on the king side, it's impossible to win. If it was a far uh, uh, if it was an outside passed pawn, which is like which would be located in a distance. So let's say we exchange this pawn for these two. Then with the b pawn, white has some chances to win the game. But in this queen in game, I think it's a draw. Both kings are compromised. Black doesn't win white doesn't win a pawn because they have this one hanging. Even if they win, 2 versus 1 on one flank, it should be a draw. So also after knight e4, I think there is a counterplay. There is a counterplay like queen a1, king e2, queen b2, and this is just a repetition. So the problem is that the king cannot escape because of this. Okay, fine. So knight e4 is interesting, but this is not the move that was played. Queen g3 was played. Why queen g3? Well, the key idea is that such a move limits the enemy king, and if, for example, the king goes here, here, or here, then it's queen g6 takes c7 with a check. So we gain a pawn with a check, and we can save the one on b4 after that, which tells us that the king can go to h5 or the king can go to f6. Well, by the first glance, moving to h5 is risky, because after the queen moves, there is a threat of g4, and the king can be checkmated very easily. For example, we bring the knight to either f6 or to f4 somehow. So this move seems to be risky, but actually there is no difference which move to play. King f6, king h5. The next strategy is this. So white makes moves which create threats. This move creates a threat of this and this, while the b4 pawn is still protected. King goes to g6. g4, now the bishop is attacked. Bishop goes to the safe place and covers this diagonal. Now what? Now, well, the king is exposed, and if white wants to continue his attack with such moves like knight d7, knight e5, and so on, they definitely need to get their king to the safe place. So king g2. What black can do? Well, black pieces are stuck. They can deliver a series of checks, but after the king goes to g3, it's difficult to continue the attack, and the c7 pawn is always vulnerable. So they play a5, trying to compromise the position of the knight on c5. What do you think we should do as white? Who can tell me? Okay, so there is a suggestion by John. What else? By the way, guys, while you are thinking, let me ask you a question. Is there anyone from Argentina? I mean, is here inside our meeting? Of course, except me. Because just yesterday I sent this invitation to one of my friends who operates the oldest chess club. I don't know whether he promoted this among his students or not, but I think there can be some Spanish-speaking people here. Okay, anyway, so John suggests knight d7, and actually knight d7 is a really good move because this move allows us to initiate the attack on the king. You remember at the very beginning I told you that the queen and the knight together can create more danger rather than these two pieces, because the bishop only attacks the squares of where he is placed, while the knight and the queen together can attack both dark squares and light squares too. So queen takes b4. They offer an exchange, but queen f6. King goes to h7, and then this. King goes to h8. Knight f6, threatening with a mate on g8. Not on h7, unfortunately, because of the bishop on b1, but definitely on g8. How to defend the position? So with this piece's activity, white forced the king to a trap, and now they need their queen to join the attack. For example, the queen can go to d2, right? Or another move is queen b8 check. So let's talk about queen b8. So for example, if queen b8 is played, how would you continue? How can you convert your advantage? You have two pieces trapping the king, and you're about to checkmate, but there is the queen that covers the g8 square.
Maybe knight e8.
Well, knight e8, but then they play queen b2, covering g7.
Then queen f8 check.
Queen f8, king h7.
Is that a repetition?
Can you do anything else?
No.
Knight h5.
Well, I think knight h5 does the same thing as knight e8.
Queen b2 is check.
Yeah, queen b2 is check. We have to. Oh, yeah, actually, yes, we have to move the king, right? So actually, after knight e8, queen b2, we have to move the king to h3, let's say, to avoid future checks. But then we are going to play queen f8 anyway. So because which move they play here? They cannot move their queen, for example, to keep checking our king because of a mate on g7 right away. So let's say they play some random move. I don't think anything else is helpful here. Let's say this move, then we play, then we still play that. And if they block, queen takes h6, bishop h7, and after knight f6, I think it's winning, right? So they can still find a way of how to defend their bishop, but then queen f8 leads to a checkmate. So bishop g8, okay, let's say a4, queen f8, king h7, knight f6, king has to go to g6 only, and in this position, you can still find how to win. Because of the enemy queen located on b2 and not protected by anything else, it is winning. And the winning move is which?
Queen g8.
No, oh, g8 maybe is winning too, but I think queen e8. Queen e8. Actually, yeah, queen g8 seems to be a more simple way to win because the king has no squares to escape. They have to take, and we do this. Yeah, right. Queen e8 works too, but okay, queen g8. Okay, fine. So this is how we win after queen b8. That's why in the game, black started checking, but after king h3, they have to bring their queen back. However, it's still the same with knight e8. This time, instead of doing queen d4, which leads to the same white's strategy as I demonstrated you after queen b2, they decided to play queen g5. It does make more sense, but it's still losing. Knight f6, and that's it. Why the game is over here? So what are we threatening here?
Queen f8.
Yeah, queen f8. So, and if they play this move to stop queen f8, then queen e8, they have to block, and this is a mate. Right. So after that, after knight f6, black resigned. Well, so what we can learn from this position? Well, here it seems to be approximately equal. But if we make moves that force our opponent to find defensive moves, then we are likely to provoke him for a mistake. So not everyone can defend his position for a series of moves. So maybe here, after king g2, maybe a5 is a mistake. Instead, they'd better play this or that move, the ones that you can see with arrows. So, but they played a5. Well, knight d7. Maybe queen b4 is a mistake. So, but, well, everyone may make queen b4 in this position. So I actually think that queen b4 is a mistake. Instead, they'd better do this, covering the f6 square. Then the king goes to h3, and this is where maybe they need to play this move, trying to create a threat of a perpetual check. If, for example, b takes a5, it should be a perpetual check. But if you play knight a7, it's a bit unclear, because this move, queen f7, king h8, knight g6, seems to be a mate, but it's not because of the bishop. So I'm not sure. So it's easy to make a mistake when you have initiative. So because initiative doesn't obligatory mean that the game is winning. The position can be approximately equal, but one player has initiative, and this initiative is considered like a type of the advantage. It's a type of a dynamic advantage, which means that if instead of developing your initiative, you are just making some static moves, which are not active, you are definitely about to lose this type of advantage. So if you play, let's say, if in this position, instead of knight d7, we continued with maybe, I don't know, king g1, or let's say knight e4, which forces this bishop e4, then I think we won't win the game. So that's why if you have a possibility to develop initiative, you should definitely use this chance in case if you're playing for a win. If, for example, you want to draw the position, draw the game, it's fine. Okay, so maybe audio is not clear because I'm not clearly explain what I want to say, but I think it's good because I'm using a professional microphone that I usually use for recording my courses. Okay, anyway, so what I wanted to tell you, once you have an ability to develop initiative, try to do it. You may not win, but you get a chance to provoke your opponent to make a mistake. And maybe instead of even if you do not provoke your opponent for a mistake, you can get some other benefits. So you can convert your initiative to something else. For example, after a series of checks, you can locate your queen in the center, and this queen will control the whole board. So this is another type of advantage. that you may obtain. Just you need to remember, once you have this initiative, you shouldn't lose it. You may convert it into another type of advantage, like extra material, checkmate, bishop pair, what else? Control over the center with your pawns or with your pieces. But if you instead play slow moves, you are likely to lose this advantage, and you may even allow your opponent to overtake the initiative. John, is it a suggestion for me? Pulse audio kill.
No, it's for some Mac.
Okay.
On Linux, it works if you do that, but
Mm-hmm.
and Mac is built on Linux, so it might work for him.
Okay,
her.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the initiative means the ability to create threats, which provokes your opponent, which forces your opponent to find defensive moves to parry the threats that you create, which is likely to provoke him to finally make a mistake, which you will take advantage of. Okay, let's continue with the next example. So today I have 4 examples. They all are from the past, so this game is even older. This is the gameplay between Bogdan Sliva. I don't know if you know this grandmaster, but Max Yuvi was playing with black pieces. And again, the position seems to be approximately equal. Well, I would, of course, prefer playing this position for black because of these pawns and the d pawn being a passed pawn. It's already far advanced passed pawn, but because the position is closed, it's not clear how exactly to play. What would you suggest? Black to move.
King e7.
King e7. Okay, bring in the king. Well, king e7 is a possibility. I don't know if they're gonna do this move after that. Well, yeah, we definitely need.
They'll play knight c6, so
Oh,
maybe
of
not a
course,
good
knight
one.
c6. So it's a blunder.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to bring the king to the game, but not with king e7. So these
Maybe
pawns
pawn,
are.
maybe pawn to f7, f6.
Maybe pawn where? f6 here to
Um,
get
f,
king
yes.
to get the king to f7.
Yes.
Okay, well, f5, then they take, and where is our compensation? f6 does make sense in order to get king to f7, yes. Well, I agree with you. This is a possibility, but seems to be quite slow. So here, these pawns are doubled, and if we want to win, we should probably somehow enter the enemy territory through the e file. And having the knight on e4 would be perfect. So Max Yuvi starts to develop this initiative. He starts with g5, creating a threat of g4, which liquidates the pawn on f3 and allows us to get the knight to e4. Of course, his opponent defends with this move. h5, so even if they take, it's first king g7, king h6, and then take and g4, trying to weaken the pawn structure and get the knight to the center. As for g6, king g7 in this original position, I think it's too slow. If you want to play something, it's better to play g5 and then king g6, king g7, king g6, or king f6. So anyway, g4, h5, h3. They do not let us to take and to get rid of the f pawn. So h takes g4, h takes g4. Now what? How to play for win? What else I want you to remember about the initiative? Usually initiative is the result of your piece's activity. That's why you may have heard such expressions or such statements, especially from representatives of Soviet chess school. Activity is better than material. So this is how they say. Why? Well, this is that means that in the for example, in any game or especially in the end game, your piece's activity is enough to compensate a pawn. And this is what exactly I'm going to show you in the next example, the game fragment from the game between Karpov and Kasparov, where one player was a pawn down, but was able to draw the game because of his piece's activity. So initiative is a consequence of your piece's activity. What can you say about your piece's activity? What can you do in this position? Looks like in this position, white is stuck with his pieces because they need to cover, they need to keep the rook in front of the d pawn to stop it.
I think you can bring out the king and put the rook on the h file.
Quite clever. So guys, I wonder why you suggest rook e8. Well, rook e8 preparing for this sacrifice. Well, it's a bit optimistic because, okay, you play this, he does this move, and once you sacrifice, he takes, and then continues with king f3.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like he defends everything, and there is no compensation for the knight. Okay, so king g7 and rook h8. Well, similar to what Alexander suggested. Yes, but do we need the king on that flank, or do we need the king somewhere in the center? Definitely in the center. Okay, Peter says that black's pawns are advanced, but black is blocked by his pawns in terms of activity. Well, not exactly. Here, I think you are a little bit mistaken, or because you think that the rook is stopped, but what the pawn is doing, the pawn is stopping the enemy rook. Because this rook has to keep an eye on the passed pawn, either the rook or the king. So actually having this pawn, even in this position that we originally have, having the pawn on d3 indicates us that here black is definitely playing for a win because of one of the enemy pieces has to keep an eye on this pawn. So in other words, one of the pieces is tied down to the d pawn. One of the white pieces is tied down to the d pawn, and that means that this piece will be a bit passive, and we can take advantage of it by doing what? By initiating, by creating a second weakness, or by initiating some counterplay on the other side of the board. Yeah, so that's why rook d6, similar to what Alexander and John told us. So rook d6 to get the rook to the h8, to the h file, I mean, and then enter the enemy territory. So rook d6. Well, what do you think if it does make sense to play such a move like this?
If rook h6, then white can't oppose the rooks because the pawn becomes a queen.
They cannot offer an exchange. So, well, okay, we play this move, they play this move. We, for example, try to activate our king, maybe 5, king d7. And then we should bring the king here.
Yeah, there's a fork on c7.
7.
Yeah, after king e8 when you play king e8 there.
Yes, right. There is a fork on c7, but I think it's not so critical for us. If they fork us on c7, we play with the king, and after they take, we can counterattack.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, this fork is important when we don't have this opportunity, but I think we do have it always. So king d7. Then we are trying to do this and take on e5 and then enter the enemy territory through the b file, which also makes sense. And even if somehow our opponent finds the way of doing rook d2, we can sacrifice, he takes, and then by pushing c3, we may promote one of our pawns. So let me find such a scenario. I just want to illustrate it. So I don't know, let's say which move. It's black to move. Okay, just a random move. Rook d2. And let's say attack this. Well, if the knight goes here, actually we are not able to initiate such an activity. Then we have to play in a different way. But if the knight goes anywhere else, then it works perfectly well. So then we promote. Okay, fine. So we need to activate the king. So let's say king e8, e5 maybe. Then we continue with king d7. Then let's say they play the knight back. Maybe rook b6 with the idea of b4. So they have to go back. We play rook b8 to keep an opportunity to go to h8 wherever we need. f4, king e6. Well, then it's just a repetition. Maybe knight here to attack. Then maybe we take and get our knight to a better spot. So we should get our pieces more activated, having in mind that the enemy rook cannot move too far from where it is. The game continued with e5, rook e6 with the tempo, f4, and instead of trying to activate the rook through the h file, which is not a good idea right away because of king g2, and then I don't know what black can do. Here, black finds another way to continue. What would you suggest for black? Knight e4 does make sense. I agree. I think there was a better move played. And let me answer the question of Georgius. So regarding why e5, what else would you suggest? So knight d5, let's say. Well, king e8, I would first activate my king, maybe to c6, or maybe just to this. Let's say, okay, king f2, rook h6, king g3, king goes to d7. Okay, let's say you do not play this move, but then I still think that we can do this idea with b4. So you have to keep making the king's moves, but then knight a6, b4 still works. And if you play this, we exchange and one of the pawns will be promoted. Oops, yeah, actually king here and then c3 wins. So they definitely need to play something. That's why they play e5. Okay, knight e4 is your suggestion. What else? Wait a sec. So which position? We have this position. Yeah, knight e4. So anything else? f6, yeah, quite clever. f6, because this is our attack, and we wanted to originally to open this file to enter the enemy camp, attack this pawn, and try to promote two pawns together. So what they can do, if this, then you take, and this is a weakness. So they take on f6, and here we take on a3. They take on g5, and looks like these pawns are dangerous, but they are not. So it's black to move, and black continues with this move, attacking both simultaneously. So g6 this time is a blunder. This knight and rook activity can also stop the king and maybe even create a threat, a mating threat or a threat of a fork. So king goes to g2. Well, why do they need to play king g2? Good question, but what else they can do? Because this is the next move. So they can probably play this move. So after which, what do we do? Check. The king goes there, and then another check, and then we take. Okay, so what else can be done? King g2 maybe. Yeah, king g2 was played in the game. So one of the pawns dies. The g5. Oh, actually, no. Black here decided to take the one on g4. King h2, rook g4. And then both pawns are lost. And white is looking for chances for a draw. So yeah, there are chances to make a draw. And the key idea is to get the position with king and rook versus king, rook, and the knight without pawns. That's why they decide to sacrifice the knight here. Take, rook takes, rook g5. Now they play b3, trying to exchange the other pawn. And what do you think how you should continue in this position? Should you take?
I was looking at knight c5, but maybe it's a bit slow.
Knight c5, he does a check. And then takes here. So, well, it's fine if we exchange another pawn. So in the game, it was knight f6. And then actually, b takes a4 becomes impossible. What's wrong with this move? So guys who are watching this event on YouTube, you can always join us on Zoom. This is the link. Yeah, so okay, so Georgios, actually it's better to pronounce your name as Georgios. It seems to me that you are from Greece. So Georgios suggests knight g4. Yeah, this is quite clever. So what's the point of this move? The key idea is that if the king goes to the g file, we have knight e5. Knight takes d3, and then we win. The king goes to h3, it's knight f2. King goes to h4, attacking our rook, but then knight d3, king takes g5, and this is a winning position because we are able to capture the pawn. So let's say king moves, knight b2, knight c4, then knight goes back, and after a3, that's it. They cannot take our knight because we promote. So our task is just to bring the king and then promote together with this knight help. So that's why b takes a4 wasn't played, rook d4 instead. And black exchanges the rooks. One pawn is enough to win the game. Moreover, after rook g4, knight g4 is a check, which allows us to capture on b3 and promote faster than the king comes to the queen side. But white plays this move, king e7, rook b8, and this is where they try to take our pawns and force a draw. But black plays just one simple move, after which white had to resign. What do you think? Which simple move I'm talking about? Black to move. Okay, Brian suggests rook b4. You mean this? And if they take, a takes b3. Oh, nice. Okay, so it's quite interesting. Well, of course it's b4, but I want to discuss this idea. It seems to be quite interesting. So what happens in case if, okay, so this is the idea. So now if rook a8, it's this and nothing can stop the pawn. Well, is there a possibility to deliver a check? Oh yeah, there is. So b2, check, and then rook goes and stops the b1 pawn. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, but b4 works. After which, white resigned. Why? Because if this move, a takes b3, and the pawn is simply promoted. And if this move, then it's this. The rook stops the pawn, but we just need to bring the knight to win. If you take with the rook, it's basically the same. Just a rook exchange and then a takes b3. So what did happen in this game? By the first glance, black seems to be strategically better because of their passed pawn on t3, but it's hard to win such a position because we don't know how can we enter the enemy territory and progress either with our pawns or capture more of the enemy pawns. And so that is why black here decided to develop initiative, having in mind that either the rook or the king has to stay closer to the d pawn to keep an eye on it. That's why g5 with the threat of g4. After white parried this threat, black decided to activate the rook through the h file. Another idea that they had in mind was something like that, to try to play b4 and open the position there. But of course, all these have to be done with the king in the center. In order to prevent active plans from black, white decided to advance their pawns, but they created a weakness on e3, which black took advantage of. Okay. Fine, let's continue with the next example. This is the game that I was talking about, Karpov and Kasparov. Karpov is playing with white pieces. Right now, the material is equal. So what do you think? Would like to move? The b7 is vulnerable. What would you suggest? Okay, so do you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So king knight c4 and rook d2, our candidate moves. So this and this. Well, I don't think this is a good idea. What if he plays b3? It seemed like a fork. Actually, wait a sec. This guy is hanging. So the knight cannot move because of the bishop being lost. So not rook d2. Yeah, it's rook d2. So this is the example where activity is more important than material. Black tries to activate the rook, attacking the pawn, and they may let white capture the pawn on b7. Well, if bishop b7, I think after rook b2, the position becomes too simple and the game is likely to end in a draw, which Gary Kasparov was okay with. So that's why the two moves that we should be looking here are b3 and b4. So rook b1 doesn't seem like a good idea, or because of this move, at least.
So knight takes a4 is not a candidate here.
Here, knight a4. Okay, knight a4,
It's a
knight takes
trade.
a4. And then
Okay.
b2 is hanging, so you have to play b3 or b4.
Yeah.
And if you play b3, I can play this move. And if you play this move, I can play this move attacking here. Wait a sec. Wait.
You just take the
What
bishop.
what did I do? Yes. So I just wanted to do this, and then I take either this or this. Maybe the one on b4 to simplify.
I see.
So, well, if b4 in this position, then the a2 is hanging. And we can also do knight d5 to block the attack of the bishop. Or just play b6 to avoid any problems. So, what happens then? Okay, what happens here? So b3 was played in the game, but let's talk about this move. So rook b2. So if they take, they lose this one, and the position still becomes equal. a3, bishop c6, knight takes b7. This is how white gains a pawn, but after bishop f3, g takes f3, we can bring the knight to the game. So we are not attacking anything at the moment, but this is what we're gonna do. And if king g2, this is a blunder, right? The rook has to stay here, so there is no way to attack, no way to play rook e1 move. So that's why, let's say knight c5, but then you play g5, and white doesn't know how to progress. If they play this move, it's knight d2. And then if, well, this is hanging, so if king g2, it's knight b3, a discovery check. If king g2, it's still knight c4, which is an attack on f3, e3. And if this move, then check, and this attack, attacking this pawn too. So e4, this, king moves away, and this, and then you take on a3, which also makes the position equal and even more favorable for black because they attack the pawn on b4.
Just
Okay.
here, Victor.
Yes.
You go forward one or two moves. No, forward.
Forward.
Slowly go back. Go back. Yeah. Now here, instead of pushing the pawn, just push the king forward.
Uh,
You do have rook b.
okay, well, knight d6 maybe. What do you think?
Or rook b3. Oh no, rook b3 is not good. So,
No, rook b3 doesn't make sense.
no.
So maybe this move.
Yeah.
I want to do this and provoke the king to go back because the king has to defend this weakness.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then you can take with the pin.
Yeah, then I can take on e3 because once the king goes to somewhere else, I just capture on f2, and white may even lose the game.
Yeah.
Because then other pawns become weaknesses. So wait a sec. Knight c4, then king g3. In the last position e4. After knight d6, you mean e4? Okay, I got the point. After knight d6, e4.
Oh yeah.
Then knight c4 back. Well, I also like this move, but let's play knight c4 back. So how do you progress in this position? My move can be... Actually, I want to get my knight to f4, and I think this is where I guarantee a draw. But, well, okay. Well, yeah, here the point is that there is no way to progress. Maybe white can stay with one extra pawn, but I don't see the way how they win the game, because a4 doesn't work, b5 doesn't work. Moving the rook means they lose on a3. So trying to attack the rook means that this is a double attack. Bringing the king doesn't work because this pawn is hanging always. So having the rook on d2 seems, I mean, on the second rank seems to be the best way. So that's why I think actually Karpov played better. He, instead of b4, he played b3. Because that limits the knight activity. So bishop c6, knight b7 anyway, and we got a similar position. So how would you continue here with black pieces?
Knight b5, I think.
Knight d5, and then this knight goes where to?
To b4 and then to e3.
Well, maybe I think Kasparov played better here. Any other suggestions? Knight d7, knight c5, knight d3. Yes, Peter, thank you. Yes, it's exactly the same. Knight d7, then the idea was to play knight e5 and knight d3. So, well, f4 doesn't look good because of this and this. And if this, and then f3, it's knight d5, which is even worse. So king g2 was played. And in order to stop f4, black first plays g5. However, knight e5 was still possible. If instead, for example, it was knight e5 to play knight c4, then knight e5 first. And if this time knight c4, which does make sense because white wants to exchange, they lose the pawn and the game ends in a draw. So after king g2, we may first stop it. Then, well, the game was continued with this move to stop knight c5, but the knight goes, well, actually knight c5 wasn't possible because of this knight. And then either knight e5 or knight b6. I think knight b6 is better because it also contains the idea of knight d5, which is a double attack. For example, if knight c5, then this move, double attack. If let's say a3, then it's knight c4. This is an attack of this pawn, and it also ties the rook down. So king g3, for example, and this is quite similar to what we had before. So we can play knight d6, so we can play with h5. And threaten with h4. Maybe king to g6 first and then h4. So that's why king f1. And they just repeated the position, knight d7, king g2, and they agreed to a draw. Okay, so, well, what do you think? Let's say king g2. Is there any chance for white to play for a win? Black is still a pawn down, but because they are initiative, they either gain a pawn back or force white to repeat the position. Well, of course, if white loses a pawn, then their position is even worse because black pieces are more active. Maybe the game still ends in a draw because it's too simple. However, well, white has some advantage at the moment. Why do they need to defend their position after they give up a pawn? That's why they prefer to keep this pawn. So what do you think? Is there any possibility for white to avoid a draw and play for a win? So okay, so Brian suggested f5. I don't know, but which moment? Well, I cannot say f5. Maybe instead of h5. No, I think you'd better bring the king first and then continue with h5, h4, or h5 first and then bring the king.
Yeah, White's only hope is their A and B pawns, I think. So they have to probably play maybe A4.
A4, yeah, but A4 has, okay, so let's say king, knight B6, so they cannot play A4. Okay, let's say in this position, after knight D7, they play A4. Well, yeah, but then it seems that knight is coming to, if, well, okay, let me check what we can do here. So rook B2, you play B5. Okay, I want to play this move. Oh, maybe let me first. Okay, no, it's fine. I think I wanted just first to play this move, but I think I can play it later. So B5. Knight F3 just. King G2. Knight goes there. So everyone who is watching on YouTube, you can guys, you guys can enter our meeting on Zoom using this link. So knight d3 and 2 pawns are hanging. Okay, maybe they should. Okay, a4. We let's say play this move. They play b5. We take, and they play a5. Seems dangerous, actually. So let me take here. If king e1, I just repeat. So probably king g2. Knight goes to g4. b6. a6. Knight c5. And then I have to do this. Yeah, okay, it's a bit risky. So it seems to me after a4 instead, well, here, then here, I should continue with knight d3. And after a5, I should take, king goes back, and then continue with rook d2 to get my pieces back. So after b6, let's say, I take a6. And then I have a repetition. So knight h2, knight f3 is just a repetition. Yeah, okay. So maybe Brian, actually maybe you're correct, and the white could play for a win with a4, but then black could still draw the game with a repetition. Okay, rook b1 at which point? Instead of a4? No, okay, no, you cannot. So not here. a4, knight e5, rook b1 in this position. Well, what's the point? I don't think it does make sense to continue with b5. I mean, to continue to play rook b1 in order to play b5. Rook b2 by black. Okay, I didn't realize it. So here, let's say a4, then rook b2 by black. They play this move. Yeah, maybe it stops the attack too. But then what? Let's say knight e5, knight d6, and they try to what? So knight d3, king g1, knight f2, a5. Knight d3, b6, and once we take, they play e6. So actually, this is where they are winning. White is winning. So rook b2 doesn't look so well. Okay, so right, what do we have? A4 was definitely reasonable, but it was not enough to play for a win, because after that, even b5, it's knight d3, rook takes there, and then after rook goes away, it's this maneuver which allows black to draw the game with a perpetual check. If white can somehow stop it, maybe with this move, then we can bring the rook to the a file and stop any piece's activity. Okay, do you have any questions regarding this example? So this example illustrated us that even without a pawn, but because of your piece's activity and threats that you are creating, it can be 1, 2, 3 moves combinations that create threats, it's still possible to survive and end the game, and at least in a draw. Okay, let's continue with the next example. This is a long example, and well, the game between Alexei Suetin and David Bronstein, both grandmasters were from the Soviet Union. So this is quite an old game. Okay, there was a good question by Peter regarding when this game was played for. Well, +5. Yeah, so the draw was okay because the Kasparov already was winning the match. That's why he was completely fine with a draw with black pieces. Now, the last example, the game between Suetin and Bronstein, it's black to move. This is where it seems that white has some initiative. By the first glance, we can say that white has more space, a domination in the center. Their knight on d4 is perfect. The pawn on e6 is a weakness. So what would you suggest? And what active actions do you think? Okay, king c8 by Brian. Can you? Okay. King c7, d7, and then knight f7. Bishop g7. Yeah, so black definitely need to bring their king to the center. However, before coming up with a plan, what we can do, we need first to realize what white active options are and how they can play for a win. Here they can play for a win. They have two opportunities. So one is to play c4, and the other one is to sacrifice the knight on f5. So either this knight and then capture on f5 with this knight and take. Okay, let me mute this guy. So either knight f5, sacrifice, then taking advantage of the pin and maybe trying to promote the pawns, or maybe taking with this knight and then capturing on d5, but I don't think this is a good idea because then these pawns are not connected, so it's more difficult to promote them. So two ideas are either c4 or knight f5, and black starts with b5 move, which stops the idea of c4. If, let's say, they played king c7, for example, the game would continue with a4, with the idea of c4, bishop g7, rook exchange, then c4, d takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop goes here, and bishop e3. And this is where we have to defend this weakness. So this position is a bit compromised. Black has to defend. By the way, what does the engine say? Okay, I'm checking. The engine says +1 and 1 here. So white is playing for a win, and mainly because of this weakness. That's why b5 first, to prevent c4. And then, of course, they understand. So white understands that black is going to bring the king to d7, which is 100% leads to a draw. Or they can only sacrifice on f5 and then hope that this is a winning position, that they gonna get some winning chances. So they sacrifice on f5, e takes f5, knight takes f5, taking advantage of the pin. Of course, we unpin with this move, but the game continues. So doing this is, for example, not a good idea, because then we lose the third pawn, but it's still a draw. So it's enough just to sacrifice one knight for these two and then attack the pawn on c3. So that's why it's better to play this move, because where this bishop goes, it has to go to a more passive position, which is f8. Now what? Knight e3, attacking the pawn on d5. So that was a critical position. White is about to capture on d5, getting 3 pawns as a compensation for the piece, but only these 2 pawns are participating in the place of action right now. The pawn on c3 doesn't count. This pawn will be important later in the game. And so, well, looks like we lose the pawn. This is where I ask you to explain what black should do in order to obtain initiative here and still equalize the position, or at least prevent white from winning the game. Because, well, the white's plan is obvious. Take, then advance, and fork. d4. Well, d4. The idea of d4 makes sense. The problem is that there are 3 pawns to promote, while you cannot convert these two into a passed pawn. So knight d5, let's say. Where do you move the bishop back? Or maybe you just defend attacking here. King goes to d3. The knight is trapped. Oh, yeah, the knight is trapped, actually. We didn't notice it. I mean, I didn't notice it first. So d4, after this move, the knight is trapped. And after this, we're gonna do this. The knight escapes. So that's why we first start with knight d5. But after king d3, the knight is trapped, and white is winning. So d4 doesn't work. So here, black finds another plan. They understand that they need to bring the king to the place of action, because in the end game, where there is no risk that the king can be checkmated, the king should play like an ordinary piece, and the king's power is equal to a rook, because it attacks the squares around it. Okay, we have some other suggestions actually after d4. Let's discuss it. So d4, c takes d4, then what? Bishop b4, knight goes there, and you have no time to play such a move because of this is attacking move. Brian suggested playing this move, but when? Right now, just a3, and there are 3 pawns, and these pawns all are passed pawns. So here, such a move doesn't make sense. In this situation, after knight c6, it's too late to play rook h3 because of king takes e4. So king b7, knight d5, and king c6. So with this king, black develops some initiative. Knight goes there, then knight e6 attacking move. And the point is that in case of f5, the knight goes there, and rook g4 doesn't work. What's wrong with rook g4? Yes, it's rook h2. Rook h2, after which the king, if the king goes to d1, it's a fork. If the king goes to b3, okay, if the king goes to b1, it's knight c3, king a1 and the mate. And if the king goes there, it's knight d3. Which threatens the threat of a mate. So they cannot capture on e4. Actually, I don't know how to play. If they play this move, it's what? Knight d2. Well, knight c5 is interesting. Is there a mate? Oh, a5 works. A5 works, right? Because a4 is the mating threat, and if this move, then it's knight c5. Take, check, this, and it's over. So the rook blocks, but it's over. Okay, fine. So f5 doesn't work, and they have to defend in a different way. So they found knight d1, which opens the bishop. And you see, black activated their pieces. They played king to b7, king to c6, moved the knight from the edge to e6, and they are creating threats. Rook h3. If now f5, it still doesn't work because of this. The pawn is hanging, and after f6, the pawns are blocked, completely blocked. There is no way to promote them anymore because there is no way to challenge this knight on e6. So, and if knight e3, which does make sense, it's knight g3 attacking this pawn on f5. And after e6, still knight f6, knight e6. So that's why the game continued with rook g6, which does make sense. But then it's rook to h6. White plays rook g8, and it seems that they create a threat of doing kind of triple attack, maybe. But it's still fine. So which move would you suggest for black in this position? Rook h2 is the suggestion by John and Brian. Okay, let me try rook h2. And if the king goes to d3, the knight is vulnerable. Knight f2, you exchange the knights, but this is a bit unclear. Because knight f2, knight takes f2, rook takes f2, and then bishop e3, and if you take there, they continue with f5. Okay, so instead it was played bishop g7. Okay, let's go through it. So knight f4 instead. Therefore, check in which position? Rook h2. What's the point? You just lose your knight? Or I don't see anything, something. Okay, what's the point of knight f4? Or knight f4 earlier? Well, I still don't see the point. So rook g8, knight f4, bishop f4. And what's then? You cannot play rook h2 in this position. Okay, bishop g7. This is how the rook is cut off from other pieces. It cannot go back. So that's why the coordination among the white pieces is ruined. So they continue with f5. Rook h2 check. What now? If the king goes to b1, how can we play? Who can tell me? Bishop takes e5, and after f takes e6. Knight d2, I don't see the point of knight d2 at all. Maybe it's still a drawing position, but yeah, bishop e5 actually is a possibility. But instead, you can just exchange the rooks. Now they are forced to exchange the rooks. So rook h8, bishop h8, f takes e6, and bishop e5 in this position. After which we realize that this pawn is lost. And then 2 versus 3 in one flank should be a draw because we can at least sacrifice one of our minor pieces for one of the pawns. So rook h2, king d3 was played in the game instead. And this is where black finds another nice combination. So can you please find it? So what do you think? Which move? So black is still trying to draw the game to parry the white's passed pawns. Knight 4 to c5. Yes, it's right. So king d5, I think, doesn't work so well. If you play king d5, they just take, and you cannot take back because of king e4. So if you play this, then it's e7. So you can deliver a check, but then it's this. And if you take here, you lose your bishop. So that's why the fourth knight goes to c5. This is the key idea, because the king, what does the king do? So they take once, and then they move their king to a3. Because if they move their king to d4, it's a check here, and the only move is this, but then it's bishop here. And you can capture the one on c1 and sacrifice your knight for 2 pawns. So king e3 right away, bishop h6 right now, king e3, quite similar to what happened, but this time the king is not cut off and is closer to the fourth rank. So knight f2. King goes to, if the king goes to d5, it's rook d8. And the point is that you cannot capture because of this fork. That's why it's too early to bring the king to d5 and create this threat. First, you need to cut the king off and also move your rook away from that fork on g4. So this time it, for example, works. This, knight g4, king f5. Actually, this is how white would better play. They can continue with rook d5, and this is how they simply draw the game. It's equal. 2 versus 2. Rook and bishop versus knight and bishop. So it should be a draw. But in order to play for a win, they played e6. After which, black starts playing for a win. So it's rook f4. I don't think it's a difficult move to find. So king g3. Well, you can capture right away, but then they play d7 or e7, I mean. So that's why king d6 first. So you stop it. And this knight is not available to help. So rook f8. Well, it seems that this can be a good move, but the problem is that they can pin us. And then the game ends in a draw, I think. But if you instead play bishop e3, attacking here, the knight goes where? If the knight goes there, you can just continue with rook c4 and take this pawn, because we understand that they cannot promote. So e7, king e7, or if f6, then we capture here. And at the very worst scenario, we just sacrifice the knight, but capture these 2 pawns with our rook. So knight g4 is the only move. And this is where the black's initiative became decisive. What do you think? How black should play here? Okay, so I think the move was obvious, knight e4. But what does this move do? Well, they have to protect the knight. So if they, for example, go to h4 right away, then knight f2 works. So they played this move, rook f3 check. If the king goes here, it's bishop f4, and after king goes to the g file, it's a fork, and we gain the knight. Because if the king goes to the h file, it's still rook h3 and then rook g3, and we gain the knight. So that's why they went to h4. But then the black's attack starts. So bishop g5, king h5, rook h3, king g6. And in this position, this seems to be an idea for black, but we need to liquidate the knight first. That's why just rook h4. Again, they cannot progress with their pawns. Neither rook d8 nor e7 works because of this bishop. f6 makes more sense, but still doesn't work because after f6 we simply capture here. And then what? We threaten with a discovered attack. We threatened just to take, and if they continue with a7, I think it's this with a check, king f5, let's say, and then this move. So they take here, we take there. Rook h4, knight goes to f2, rook h6 check, king goes to g7, knight takes knight, and they played rook e8, but it was too late. After knight g4, there is a mating threat, so they did capture here, but after king e5, there are no more checks. Rook goes to b6, bishop f6, and king to f7. Can you guess the next move of black? Rook h7 check, but then king goes to e8. I think then the king is able to escape. Well, I'm not sure, because if you lose the b5 pawn, you may not, it will be quite difficult to win the game. Yeah, so John is absolutely correct. It's king f5, vacating the e5 square for the knight. Check, and knight 95 is a check. The king goes back, and this is a checkmate. Doesn't matter where he goes. It's a checkmate anyway. So the only way to avoid is just to sacrifice the rook. So that's why here, white, Alexei Suetin, resigned. So king takes, and if e7, it's just check, and rook takes g7. That's it. These pawns are too far, and black is completely winning. So the game was originally equal and could end in a draw, but here black first tried to prevent the initiative that white could develop. However, white still sacrificed the knight in the hope for two passed pawns, which would provide them with some practical chances, because they can also get the third pawn as the compensation. But then with this pieces activity, king with a temper, and 96, black was able to develop initiative, which was enough to fight for a draw. And later, in this position, e6. So e6 is the key mistake. E6 is the mistake which allowed black to play for a win with rook f4, and then by activating their pieces and trying to trap the king, they were able to create a mating net, which is quite rare in the endgames, but sometimes makes sense while your pieces are active and the enemy king is in a very, it has very low space. Of course, if white could save the game if they played rook c8 in this position. So rook c8, king d5, then rook d8, then knight g4, and so on. Then the game would end in a draw. But they were hoping to play for a win, as the result, they lost the game because they didn't realize how strong the initiative of black is. Okay, guys, so we are done for today. Next weekend, there will be masterclass by Pavel Martinov, FIDE Master Pavel Martinov. He's going to demonstrate 10 most common and most effective sacrifices. So that's why the next weekend, 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, he'll be doing 2-hour sessions. And I think that it's time for us to play Simul on Sunday. Instead of our regular webinars, I suggest to play Simul on Sunday. I didn't think about the format, but I think the key idea will be to play several games, maybe not many, 5 or 6, and then analyze them. So yeah, how many attendees do we have today? Well, the maximum was 16, now it's 10. So if you guys want to play in that simul, I think it will be a longer time control, like maybe 30 plus 30. So the key idea is to play and then quickly analyze the main mistakes. I'm not going to take many games in a row, so let's say maybe 9 is maximum, but I would prefer if it was 5 or 6 on average. Okay, fine. So this is my suggestion. What is it? Simul. I said simul. It's simultaneous exhibition. Well, in Russian it sounds like сеанс одновременной игры, where a stronger player plays with several not so strong chess players simultaneously, making moves on different boards. Okay, so by the way, guys, did any one of you joined the Chess World Academy that I suggested? So where we are. This. So you remember last time I was talking about the Chess World Academy, and if you joined, I'm sure you will already take benefits of it. Yeah, I think you can see my screen. Well, and if you need this link or the link to join it, yeah, let me type it in the chat. So there are also some of my courses. I'll show you. And I would recommend the ones that are devoted to Evans Gambit. Where is it? Win with Evans Gambit. Most of my students have it. And Max Lange attack. This is the way how to play e4, e5 positions for a win. Also, if you have any questions, you can always message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So this is an email for you. Okay, so no questions. Thank you for coming. See you next weekend on a simul, and good luck with your games during the next week at least.
Thanks very much, Victor.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.